My pleasure to welcome Maxime Durand from Ubisoft. Maxime is the franchise historian. He's been doing that since 2010, I understand, with Assassin's Creed. And he's the third lecturer in our series, the Shannon Lecture Series on Performing History, Restaging the Past. So welcome to Carleton, Maxime.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So my first question, I guess, is really the most obvious one, is how on earth did you come to be production coordinator and franchise historian, historical researcher at Ubisoft? And what drew you to working in video games as a historian?
That's the question that kills. It's the $100 answer. Obviously, I was studying history in University of Montreal. And then when I was about done, I was so sick of history and so sick of studying that I wanted to do something else, which is exactly what happened, that Ubisoft was looking to hire a historian. So they sent that letter that was stating they look for a historian, professional, dynamic, and that would tell the team about natives, about the American Revolution, the French and Indian War. So these were actually my fields of expertise. And because I knew a little bit about Ubisoft, my brother works there, I knew also about the Assassin's Creed series, even though it wasn't stated that it was Assassin's Creed. But on paper, it looked like it a lot. So I applied, and it took many interviews, and then I got the job. So I'm super happy. Everyone wants to steal it away from me, and I have to fight sometimes. Seriously, it was a dream job to get that opportunity to work with a professional team, hundreds of people, to recreate cities of the past, environments of the past on a daily basis. It's awesome.
Great. Well, the other day, one of my colleagues, Jean-Pierre Morin, introduced us to Assassin's Creed, and he had us playing the Renaissance Venice version of it, and I was very struck by the realism of the cityscapes as we moved through the streets, and as we swam canals and we jumped over the rooftops. And I wondered about the process of, if you could just tell us a little bit about the process of recreating those cities like Venice or Victorian London in the newest version.
It's a bit like thinking about it when you're asking the question, actually. So you're talking about these canals in the Italian Renaissance. I have ideas about it, and everyone on the team works on that same way. They have an idea to start with, but how we actually produce the game is that we do a lot of research. We do research on the maps of the time periods. We do research on the historical characters, the events. So we go with something that's very wide, a big scope for a time period that we decide. And then we narrow down, we go into details, we go into the structure, the architecture, the textures, the sentences, the ideas, the mentalities of the time period, and we're trying to bring that into the game. So not only recreating Hollywood-like sets and cardboards, but really having something vivid and having crowd lives that are representative of the past. So this is tremendous because we have this ability to try to reproduce the past into something that's credible. We know it's not in the exact past. It's not a documentary. We try to reproduce something that's fun. So we use history as a mean to have fun for players.
So that allows us to really sort of immerse ourselves in these landscapes, and it seems very realistic the way you're actualizing the past, maybe because you are using maps and architecture and paintings and so on. But I was also struck by the soundscapes, and for that there aren't really that many sources that tell you what it sounded like to be in Victorian London or in Venice or wherever. So I just wondered about really about using your imagination to create something like a historical soundscape, and how does that play out?
For instance, I'll take the example of Paris that we did last year in Assassin's Creed Unity, so revolutionary Paris. It's a big city, it's one of the biggest at the time period in the world. In Europe, it's largely the biggest. It's filthy, it's dirty, so the kind of inspiration we'll use is actually documentaries most of the time. So we'll think about professionals that talk about filthiness, about tanneries for leather, for instance, in that time period. We'll think about horses. We'll use novels like The Perfume of Patrick Susskind. So that talks a lot about the mentality of the period, but also exactly how it felt. And if a book can bring you that, pictures should be able to bring you that, especially if you see everything. So there's a common saying in video games that 50% of the experience is audio. So we use music from the time period. We also try to think about how the sound of a church would affect in the cities, also the time life, about every activity that people do, and then we use our creativity towards that. So we have people that are recording sounds of shoes all day long, or horses, or just expressions of daily life, and that's how we build something that's credible.
Great. Okay, well, on your website, there's a really interesting phrase that struck me. It described you as helping to ensure accuracy in terms of storyline, in terms of historical events in the period. That's sort of a given. But also it said to ensure accuracy in terms of gameplay. So I wondered about the tensions between what makes playing history great on the one hand, and on the other hand, historical accuracy. And how do you resolve that tension, and what wins out in the end?
Fun will always win. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. As I said, we use history as a context, but we want to make sure it's fun. So how do we do the difference between the two of them? Well, we don't. We try to merge the two of them. So if we understand, for instance, the fighting system in the 18th century, we understand how muskets were not efficient. We understand how modern warfare also changed the American Revolutionary War. This affects the gameplay. This means that, for instance, if the player attacks the drummer in a fighting line, well, he's gonna destroy the morale of the troops. So he's gonna affect the gameplay. So we want the player to understand how we can affect his environment, and for us, it's really how history can affect that gameplay. So how, if we talk about America versus Europe in the different Assassin's Creed games, well, we wanted to give the freedom of navigating in trees and the wildlife in America. So again, this affects the gameplay. While in Europe, it was more about the canals. It's more about the cityscape, about tall buildings. So we always try to reconfigure the game around these ideas of the time period, around the fact that weapons are different, but it's not just about that. It's about also horse traveling, ships. We started off with Assassin's Creed 3 in 2012 to have battleships and sea warfare, because it was super important for that time period. Everything was carried out by sea. So for us, this affected the way we saw that time period, and it affected also the gameplay and the fun experience.
Mm-hmm. So the last question I'd like to ask you, Maxime, is I wonder if you could just say a little bit about your take as a video game designer on the relationship between history and performance.
I think there are many things we can link in common between teaching history, learning history, and video games, especially with a series like Assassin's Creed games. The focus we have in mind when we create these games, again, is for fun, and history is a context. It's a mean to obtain that. While we're trying to go towards that direction, we always have something in mind, is the player motivation, and I think we should merge that in classrooms as well in the way we learn history. Why are people playing Assassin's Creed games? Well, because they want to have fun. They are learning at the same time because they're challenged to learn in a way while playing the game, because they want to overcome the difficulties. We should learn from that and maybe try to apply that to all different aspects of teaching history. Of course, we need scientific history. We need people to do research, because this is the basis of what we use to recreate our cities of the past and our experiences. But I think there's more towards that, and a company like Ubisoft can definitely go into also trying to find other solutions to accommodate more teachers. Right now, obviously, our games are rated mature, 18 plus. So if a teacher wants to use it in high school, it's maybe at his own risk. Although the value is there already in the game. So hopefully we'll see that in the future how it goes. But I'm pretty adamant that what we have right now is already very interesting.
Well, I think I'm convinced. Yeah.
So thank you.
So thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.